Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Shelby County Historical Society History Moment. My name is Trace Kirkwood and I'm going to tell you a little bit about a kind of a forgotten part of Shelby and Jefferson County, and that's the Brent Lawn Race Course, which was a harness racing track that operated between 1947 and 1955 that straddles the county line with Jefferson County. In 1947, the St. Matthews Trotting Horse Association decided that they wanted to build a harness racing track that featured pari-mutuel wagering in eastern Jefferson County. So they purchased the old Echo Valley Trail farm that sits on the Jefferson County Shelby County line, and shortly after the purchase they started doing an extensive excavation to create the track. They actually moved 60,000 cubic yards of earth to create the track. They had to reroute the south branch of Long Run Creek to create this track. By the fall of 1947, they started having racing dates here. They had 21 days of racing here. It turned out to be very popular, and people came from primarily Louisville, but some people came from Shelby County to enjoy the racing. Now, one of the odd features of this racetrack, the county line of Jefferson and Shelby County bisects the track almost exactly in half. And the other odd thing about that is where the finish line was on the front stretch, which is on the north side of the racetrack, closest to US 60, the finish line and the county line intersected right there. So when they had races and a horse was lagging behind, the fans would say, that horse is being left in Shelby County. And of course, when they crossed the finish line, they were in Jefferson County. There was another distinct thing about that, in that Jefferson County allowed alcohol sales and Shelby County did not. So in the grandstand that they constructed on the north side of the track, which was visible from US 60, well, they had a line that indicated where Shelby County was, and if you had alcohol, you could not take it over onto the Shelby County side of the grandstand.
Oh no!
Keeping Shelby County pure. And so probably a large part of the crowd probably stayed over in Jefferson County. But the horse barns for the track were in Shelby County, and most of the track was in Shelby County. So it is a Shelby County thing, even though it was kind of a Louisville operation. The Brent Lawn Race Course was no small undertaking. The people that behind the creation of it were serious about having a first-class racing facility here. So they hired Charles Black to design the track here. And Charles Black was better known for designing the race course at Keeneland. So they wanted a first-rate track because they were looking to attract horses, riders, owners, and trainers from around the United States to come here and race their harness racing. This was a harness racing track, not a thoroughbred track. So the track opened in 1947, and the opening night across US 60 at the Hume Bischoff House, which was owned by the Bischoffs at the time, they hosted a reception for the opening of the track, which included the governor, Simeon Willis, who spent the evening at the house and also over here at the track. It was a successful kickoff for the first season of racing. Like I said, it included 21 dates, and it was a very popular spot. So in 1948, they applied for and received more racing dates, and I believe in 1948 they had as many as 54 dates scheduled. Unfortunately, 1948 was a very dry year, so they had to cut the fall meet. They raced in September and October here at this track. They had to cut that meet short because of water shortages for horses. Horses drink about 5 gallons of water a day, so they went through a lot of water here at the track, and they didn't have enough water supplied, so they cut the meet short that year. They missed a couple of years of racing here because of investment situations, and also they had trouble attracting horse owners to bring their horses here to Brent Lawn. And then they resumed racing in 1952. 1952, they were plagued by a terribly cold fall. I've looked at the statistics, and it was one of the coldest Octobers on record for the Louisville area. They raced at night here. Each night was about 15 to 20 and sometimes more than 20 degrees below normal. So it really cut into the crowds, and the attendance dropped off because of that reason, and they ended up cutting that meet short. But one of the minds behind Brent Lawn Race Course was a man named Clarence Kirchdorfer, whose family owned an appliance store on Baxter Avenue in Louisville, and he was very active in the Louisville Chamber of Commerce, and he was the driving force behind this. He was not the owner. A pair of brothers from Buffalo, New York owned the track at that time, They were called they were the Faxon brothers, but they had Mr. Kirchdorfer run the track for them. And Mr. Kirchdorfer did everything he could to make this a success, to build upon what they initially started out with as a first-class harness racing track. One of the things that Mr. Kirchdorfer tried to do was to try to get a license to run thoroughbreds here, but the Kentucky Racing Commission turned them down, and a lot of that was because the Kentucky Racing Commission was biased towards Churchill Downs and also Keeneland. Despite Mr. Black being on the board of directors for Brent Lawn, he didn't have enough sway over Churchill Downs, who had a key member of the Racing Commission who led the Racing Commission into not allowing Brent Lawn to run thoroughbreds. Harness racing had not really caught on very well in Kentucky, specifically in the Louisville area. Douglas Park in Louisville had run trotters and had failed. It had been tried several times. And the innovation here was that they ran at night. And that was an innovation that was sweeping through the trotting horse industry at the time, proving to be great success at various tracks, just not here. Part of that was the access to Brent Lawn Racecourse being 18 miles from downtown Louisville, being about almost the same distance from Shelbyville. It was kind of difficult to get here. And at one point, Mr. Kirchdorfer had buses that would pick people up at the Greyhound bus station in Louisville and bring them out here to the track, and then at the end of the night's racing, they would take them back to Louisville. They also, other years, they did that from the Brown Hotel. You could go to the Brown Hotel, board a bus, ride it out here to Brent Lawn, spend the evening wagering on horses and drinking alcohol as long as you stayed on the Jefferson County side of things. And then they would take you back to, to the Brown Hotel, so you could walk home or drive home, depending on where you lived in the city of Louisville. At times, for big racing nights, they would have a lot of horses that were on the card here, and they would actually house some of the horses. They would stable some of the horses at the Shelby County Fairgrounds in Shelbyville. They used the barns there to stable some of the horses. So in 1953, there was a very unfortunate incident here at Brent Lawn that one of the barns, actually I think it was two of the barns, caught on fire, and it killed a couple of horses, one of which belonged to a 16-year-old who was somehow associated with the St. Matthews Trotting Horse Association. I can't remember that story right off. But it also injured a 16-year-old groom who was from Ohio, and he had to be taken they took him to Eastwood initially for medical treatment, and then on to the General Hospital in downtown Louisville. He survived, but it was a kind of a devastating fire for the track. They had another race meet in August of 1954. It was fairly successful, but the crowds were way off for the racing here. And then in 1955, they had their final season of racing here at Brent Lawn. They just could not. They lost $40,000 each year in the 1950s trying to keep this track going. So eventually, Mr. Kirchdorfer and the Faxon brothers decided that it was time to shutter the track. The track afterwards, in the 1950s and into the 1960s, was used as a sprint car track, or a midget car race track. So they did that for several years, and then I think it was 1961 or 1962, it was turned into a Wild West town, something along the lines of Guntown Mountain down in Cave City, Kentucky, where kids and their families could come and they would put on shows of cowboys and Indians, or maybe bank robbers. They'd have fake pistols shooting at each other. And by the middle of the 1960s, the Wild West town had shut down. The track was shut down. They didn't race here anymore, and it stood dormant and fell into decay. Today, it is on private property. There are 5 houses that sit in front of it between the old track and US 60. You can't come onto the track. I'm here with permission from a couple of the landowners today, and so don't try to come out here and take a look at it. But there are remnants of the track still visible today. I'm standing on the first turn, just coming off of what was the front stretch of the track, and I'm standing where the gate car would have driven. Behind me, going to the turn down low on the track, is where the harness horses would have raced. So, and it's still very visible from the air today, and when you walk around the turn, you can see that it was a very well-designed track. there's a nice arc to the turn and also a very slight banking to the turn, which is common for a harness racetrack. But you can also see the groove that the old midget cars wore into the track. There are some remnants of the old light standards. Like I said, it was a lighted track. They raced at night, and even some of the old ceramic insulators are still attached to the poles but they cut the poles off with a chainsaw. And there are actually some of the posts from the old inside rail from the track that are still visible today. So one of the funny things about the Brent Lawn Race Course is that when they bought a tote board, they bought it from Australia. I don't know who in Australia, but it came with an Australian who knew how to run that tote board. And so he was always the one running the tote board. And Hobie Henninger, who lives in Simpsonville now, used to work here at the Brent Lawn Race Course. He came in he was a teenager. He would come in here in the mornings and sweep up the trash and debris from the grandstand. And that Aussie would be here working, and he walked around singing, "I'm going to walk behind you on your wedding day," which was an Eddie Fisher hit in 1953. And apparently that was the only American song the guy knew. He walked around singing it all the time. And Hobie can still sing the song, I think, but I can't. So one of the problems with Brent Lawn Race Course's success, like so many places that are innovative, is that it was ahead of its time. The industry was going to lit racing, and this was kind of a few years before that really caught on, and it was in anticipation of the development of Louisville spreading east, and it was way before its time. So if they had tried this maybe 10 years later, as Louisville had expanded eastward, people maybe would have had better access to the Brent Lawn Race Course. And it would have been an easier trip for people to come out from the suburbs of Louisville to the county line to watch horse racing. Just want everybody to know about Brent Lawn. It was a very special place in the history of Shelby County and the history of Jefferson County, part of Kentucky's horse racing heritage that is gone today, but still with us almost like a ghost. So this is one of the things that I like to do as a historian, is I find old places like this where you can still kind of see something on the landscape, do some research, flesh out a story about it, and share that with people. So I hope you have enjoyed this history moment with the Shelby County Historical Society. Thank you very much.